Hey everybody, hope you're doing well today. Great to be back. Hope you guys had some restful time off. Hopefully nobody is suffering from the virus or their family, so I apologize if you're having to deal with any of that. And at any time over the next 7 or 8 weeks when we're trying to finish up the semester, please feel free to reach out to me and let me know if you have some circumstances you're dealing with and you have some challenges. I'd be more than willing to work with any of you. Just need to know, so feel free to reach out to me and let me know how I can help. This may be your first time doing an online class, hopefully not. I will admit that I have not used Zoom very often. I've only used it one other time, and so I'm still kind of learning all the ins and outs. But before we get started, I just want to let you know that I'm going to record some shorter lectures. I'm not going to do a full hour long lecture over each material. The next 4 chapters remaining in the semester are fairly short chapters. And the good news is a lot of you will be thrilled. You don't have to do your workbooks. It's hard for me to correct those, but I will have homework that I'm going to post online, and it's going to be along the lines of some of those questions, so you'll have to submit them electronically. The exams, I'm going to have them posted on Blackboard. They will be timed. Working with staff over at Missouri State to get that done. I've never created those and put those in Blackboard. They will be the same format that you're used to today, meaning we'll have some multiple choice as well as essay or short answer questions. Just going to be putting them in Blackboard. And with that, I'm going to start. Instead of starting off, the next exam will be over chapters 8 and 9. Chapter 8 is over contractual risk transfer. I wanted to go back and refine that's an ever-evolving topic, so I wanted to update my slides, and I haven't got an opportunity to do that, but I'm going to jump ahead to chapter 9. This will also be on your next exam. So I'm going to turn over and share my screen with you. Chapter 9 is on transferring financial risk. Essentially, when an organization owns and uses some kind of financial instrument, whether that be checking account, bonds, stocks, any other document that has a monetary value, there is some risk associated with that. We call those things financial risks. Any financial instrument that could potentially go up or down in value that doesn't maintain its value or has some credit risk associated with it. So what is financial risk? Essentially, it is the risk associated with uncertainty that arises from the effects of market-related forces on a financial asset or liability. Maybe it's not just an asset, somebody owes you money. It could be that you owe the bank money. Maybe the interest rate is a variable rate that could go up, which actually could potentially increase your liability over time. So it can actually increase your debt, or it could decrease the value of your asset. Either way, it would be a negative. So we're going to talk about 3 major categories of financial risk. The first being market risk. This is the risk associated with investments or a portfolio that you have that can either increase or decrease related to market-related changes, and we're experiencing a lot of that currently. So a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today, we're actually living it. And I don't know if you guys have all lived through that. You guys were probably most of you were probably pretty young when the 2008 last financial crisis hit, but this one, it appears to be much worse. So a lot of people are dealing with market-related risks as they're watching their investment portfolios crash. Second major category is credit risk. We call that counterparty risk. That is the risk that somebody, a party that you're doing business with, who's obligated to pay you money. Maybe they owe you some money for a car, or you've lent them money and they can't pay you back. Maybe you have a binding agreement, a contract, and I'm seeing a lot of that as well currently hitting people. If you have a car payment and you get laid off and you have a job and you're not able to make that car payment, the bank or the financial institution that's taken on your loan may be experiencing some credit risk that people aren't going to be able to pay back the debt that they promised. And the third category is pricing risk. So as a business who's selling a product, it could be a service as well, but for the most part, let's just talk about the price that we choose to sell our product for. There is some uncertainty. What if we set a price, a fixed price, and agree to sell it for, and then come to find out the input cost of what goes into making that product has gone up, and I have no way, I have fixed contracts and can't raise the price of my product. Or conversely, it could be that I set a price thinking it's a competitive price, come to find out another competitor's undercut me, so that could be a pricing risk. All right, if we look at market risk, there's actually 3 subcategories of risk that we will focus on, and we'll look a little closer at market-related risk. Most of these are common. You guys have seen these in other financial management classes. The first being interest rate risk. Again, something we're dealing with in a very volatile market that we're experiencing with the current pandemic. We don't know right now, interest rates are going down. We also are experiencing that interest rates and returns are going down, so we're not getting the value on our investments that we were in our portfolio. So sometimes it's good, it lowers our cost of debt, but it could also decrease the value of our assets that we have that we're holding. The second one being exchange rate risk. This would be if you're actually doing business in a foreign country and you have a denomination like the value of the dollar against the euro. If it were to decrease, it might have an impact, especially if you have fixed contracts that have dollars associated with a fixed dollar amount, and you can't adjust that based on the exchange rate. So, for example, the risk that the dollar, it could depreciate in value in comparison to a euro, but the price, maybe you have a contract in place with a foreign distributor that you've already agreed to a fixed price that you're going to sell it for. And so even though your value went down or went up, and for dollar value compared to the euro, you could actually take a hit. And maybe that foreign business would actually have to take a lower amount for their product, depending on who's the buyer seller here. But if you agree and lock into that pricing in advance, that could put you at a disadvantage. Third being liquidity risk. So this is another risk that we're actually going to see, unfortunately, with the pandemic. A lot of companies and individuals are dealing with, I need to find liquid assets that can help me sustain my operations or my lifestyle for a period of time. Anytime there's uncertainty about having enough cash or assets on hand that can be, and those things that can be converted to cash, which we call liquid assets, there might be that immediate demand for cash. Maybe you don't have any revenue flowing in, so how are you going to pay the bills? Would you have to sell off assets to pay for your bills? So these are kind of things you need to look at. And depending on how quickly you have to sell, you might actually have to get a discount on the things that you're selling. So rather than waiting and getting the full value for a piece of land, maybe the market's down, you're forced to sell something, and maybe the land is worth less today than what it would have been if you waited a few more years or until the market turns. So may or may not be a good time, and you're taking a discount or a loss. Talk a little bit more about the second category of credit risk. So obviously when we do a business with somebody, whether the bank's doing business with us, when we're about taking out a loan, all of you probably are taking out student loans and the government's taking that on. Except the good thing with the government is you can never walk away from student debt. So there is certainty. If you choose not to pay back your student debt, it's going to harm your credit forever. But most banks don't get that opportunity, and they will watch people file bankruptcy and basically say, I can't pay it. I don't have the income, and you can take back the asset if it exists, or you can file and reduce my credit rating based on my failure to pay you back. So that uncertainty that someone's going to pay you back, the bank takes on some credit risk when they give you a loan. Even if you have good credit, there's always the potential that you lose your job or something happens, you become disabled, you became unable to support yourself and pay your bills. So anytime you purchase goods on credit, the income comes from the sale is at risk. So you sell somebody something and they say, I'm agreeing to pay for it. You're willing to finance it for me for the next 24 months. Give you an example, like you go to Lowe's and you decide to buy a washer and dryer. You take out a Lowe's credit card, never used one before. You go in there and they say, sure, we'll let you take that home tonight. With the promise that you're going to pay us back in the next 24 months with no interest. Some of them charge interest. Well, what happens if you decide I can't pay that back, or you just walk away, you destroy the property, they can't really come back and get it, but that's a risk, a credit risk that they're taking on. So both when you're offering loans, let's say you are the lender, you're not only putting your principal at risk, you're also putting the interest that they're going to owe you at risk. Maybe The principal's kind of protected because one, they could sell the asset off if they were to recoup it or repossess it, foreclose on it, but they're probably not going to get the interest potentially back. And this can directly, anytime you have credit risk, especially if you're a lender and you have receivables where people owe you money, there's always a potential that it can impact your balance sheet and your net worth. And this is something as a utility, believe it or not, we're looking at really closely. We have revenues. People are still running their meters, are still plugging in plugging in their appliances and burning electricity. They're still turning on the water and they're running up utility bills. But there's a chance that we're not going to, in the interest of the good interest of the community, we're not going to shut off their power or their water during this period of crisis. What if they decide they lose their job and they're not going to be unemployed? They're going to be unemployed for several months or years. Maybe they'll never pay back that debt that they owe us. It's a receivable that we may not be able to collect on. So the value of our receivables on our financial statement would actually go down. Talk a little bit more about pricing risk. So again, I talked about being a competitive business. Anytime you have a price that either the price that you have for the things you're putting into making a product, as well as the price that you set for your product and what you're going to sell it at. There's two pieces. There's the input risk, price risk, and the output price risk. So the input side, this is really where you're manufacturing or the associated cost of the resource. Maybe you're selling a trailer. You build trailers and it takes, you have to put wheels on it. You're going to have scrap metal. You're going to have, screws, bolts, nuts, all these things that you're going to put on this trailer. And maybe you learn the price of tires has gone up, or you've learned that the price of the material steel that you're going to put into it, metal that is going to go into it, has gone up. Maybe you've already set a contract in place which fixes what you're going to sell that trailer at to a third party. And all of a sudden you find out, well, I can't get those supplies anymore. They're at an increased cost. And I am sure there are plenty of businesses out there today's last few weeks are dealing with this. So we're finding out that some products are coming at a premium. They're short in demand. The supply is short. People want them. For example, cleaning supplies are not available, or maybe there's certain aspects of their business that maybe they used to get their shipment out of Europe and their shipments have been closed down. So all of a sudden, in order to get another supplier, they're going to have to pay a premium. So those are potential input risk, price risk. Output is with the uncertainty of what you can charge for your product. So you're in a competitive market. You hope to sell it at a certain price to recoup what you've put into it. We call that, anything you make over what your cost is a margin. Well, that's great until you get additional competition. And this happens a lot of times with foreign competitors. We can make it in the US, we make a good product, and then along comes a third world country who can produce the same product at a cheaper price, and they can undercut us. So that would be an output price risk. Derivatives. So most of you have had exposure to derivatives in other financial classes. What are derivatives? Essentially, these are financial contracts that allow, and the value of the derivative or this contract derives its value from an underlying asset. Could be a commodity, could be some kind of other financial product. Maybe the value of, for the best example for us at a utility would be natural gas. So we actually buy gas options. So what's the price of natural gas today versus what will it be in the future? And we actually use some of these financial derivatives to, one, lock in the high end and a low end. So there's less variability in the pricing for our customers. It's an advantage. It actually gives us the ability to better budget and control costs for all individuals involved. Sometimes the financial contracts or derivatives are based on an underlying index, such as the S&P 500, where they actually, if the index goes up, you may have a certain return. It may be worth a certain value versus what it's been doing lately, and the index has gone down. So it may have lost value, this derivative. Forward contracts also includes futures. So those are the two major categories of derivatives, but we also have two others, options and swaps, and we'll quickly go through those. A little bit more about forward contracts. So these are contracts that obligate one party to buy and another party to sell at a very specific price for a fiscal commodity. I mentioned natural gas options or forward contracts. We have several in place. We not only have one in place for the next winter, but the winter after that and the winter after that. So we try to project what we think natural gas prices are going to be. It's crazy how gas prices can be all over the place, just like we're experiencing with petroleum today and buying gas at the pump. We're seeing prices are substantially less than they've been in the past. I think back in about 5 years ago when I took a long road trip, and I think gas prices were about $4 a gallon, and we're now seeing things below $2 a gallon, which is unbelievable. Natural gas is the same thing. I have seen natural gas over the last 25 years. I've worked at the utility anywhere up into the $10 to $12 per decatherm, and that's just a unit of measure for a particular volume of natural gas. We are now seeing things that are below $3 per decatherm, so much lower. But we don't know what's going to happen. Maybe this financial crisis may increase the cost. Maybe we'll have a shortage of natural gas. So we try to lock in those rates so that we don't have wide fluctuations, because what happens with our bills is that we actually pass along the cost of the fuel to our customers. So if natural gas prices go up, we're going to pass that along directly to our customers. If they go up to $10 a decatherm, that's a huge hit on our customers. We don't want that to happen, so we try to put it in between high end and low end and try to limit that variability. Essentially, they're usually exchange traded if it's a futures. This is one where you're actually predicting what the future price is and you can actually trade it out. It's actually a transferable financial instrument. People actually buy, pork bellies or different types of futures on different commodities that can trade on the open stock market. What do forward contracts essentially do? They're hopefully reducing the risk of those price fluctuations of those commodities and using a financial instrument to keep that in check. And it definitely helps better plan and budget with regard to price changes so that you aren't caught off guard with substantially higher rates. So what is an option? An option is essentially, it's available for different types of financial instruments. Stocks have an option, commodities, foreign exchange rates, and other traded securities have options that you can purchase. And there's two parties to this. You have the buyer and you have a seller. The person that's holding the option, these two parties agree that I will either buy something at a particular price and you're willing to sell at a particular price. You set that price in advance. Let's say the price goes higher, has a higher value than we agreed upon. I can then buy that because I've already got an agreement that you're willing to sell it to me for a specific price, and the price goes up over that dollar value, then I can go ahead and buy it from you and turn around, and then I have more value in that asset. I can buy it at a lower price than what the market is. We call that strike price. The price at which your stock or your commodity that you've agreed to in the option can be either called upon, purchased is what we call that. You're purchasing at a certain price, and it's also the opportunity for you to sell it at a certain price. So it works both ways. Let's say the prices go down, and the individual that has the opportunity for these asset, they have the ability to sell it to you, and you have to take it at that agreed upon price. So you both get something out of the deal. Depending on the market, you both are taking a little bit of risk. So when a value goes up over the strike price, you as a buyer get an opportunity to realize a gain because you know it's worth more than what you're buying it at. If the value is below the strike price, you obviously don't want to get rid of it. You don't want to pay more for it than what it's worth. But that buyer has an option, and they're willing to sell it to you. They get to make some money. So a couple options there. The best way, I definitely want you guys to know for the exam, what's the difference between a call option versus a put option. I always try to say put option is something I'm putting on you a price that you're not willing to take, but I have that right because of the agreement. So it gives the holder the right to sell it. I'm putting that price and not selling that asset on you. Calling means I'm going to call you up and I'm going to tell you, go ahead and give it to me. So when I call you up, I'm telling you, I want it, bring it to me. I'm willing to buy it at that price. And that's the best way I can remember it. May not work for you, but that's how I've always thought about it. Swaps, a little bit different. These are structured so that no money really is paid between the two parties up front. It's an agreement. It's tracked over time. So instead of cash flows being exchanged back and forth like in these options, you're actually keeping track of it, and you really only settle up every so many months. So as an example, you may agree up front that I'm going to pay you a fixed interest rate. You're willing to take that interest rate, but if interest rates go higher, I may be willing to pay you more. And you go back and forth seeing where the market interest rates fall. And after 3 months, every quarter, you actually settle up. So you have, between two companies, one of them maybe have a better opportunity to earn money. They commonly use these to manage interest rate risk and currency rate risk. Maybe you're gambling on what you think the currency rate's going to be or the interest rate's going to be, and you're working with another party that's willing to give and take and set up an arrangement with you to kind of streamline and smooth out the variances. The last thing we're going to cover is securitization. So what that is, we talked about needing liquid assets and receivables. Somebody owes you money. When we sell something on credit, we don't collect money always right away. We have 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. If you've ever had a credit card, maybe you buy something large on credit and you don't plan on paying for it for several months. Maybe you're going to make payments on it. That is something that has value, but it won't be collected or realized for several months. Well, what can a person do, or what can a company do in order to get their money up quicker and actually have cash in their hand? They can sell those receivables. So this allows the organization to convert an asset like to cash that's on their balance sheet. It could be a mortgage receivable. That's the best example. Most of you probably don't have a mortgage payment, but a lot of times what happens, you place a mortgage with a company, and a lot of times it's transferred to a new organization who then pays out and manages your mortgage for the remainder of the years. But they do sell and trade off these receivables. So assuming there is a market for these assets, so receivables typically have an asset or a market. People are willing to buy them. They might project that interest rates will go down from what you currently have, and so they'll actually make money. But how this occurs, it's not just one company or one party reaching out to another saying, I'm willing to sell it to you. They typically use an intermediary, a third party, which we call a special purpose vehicle, SPV. And this intermediary serves in the transaction in that they buy the asset, the receivable from you. They give you a price, obviously not full price, and they're willing to turn around and sell that asset to a third-party investor. So different way to look at it, but they get an opportunity to make money. They're going to get a percent. But basically by handing off this receivable, you have reduced your credit risk. You don't longer have to worry if you're going to collect from the people. You're getting the dollar value at that point in time. You don't have to worry about whether someone's going to pay you back. The next person who's holding that will have that risk, and they're willing to take on that risk by getting a premium. Securitization transactions are highly scrutinized because there's opportunities for manipulation, and the way they're disclosed in the past, they have been misused. The model essentially is the organization sells their income-producing asset to the intermediary or SPV, and the SPV would turn around and sell that security to an investor that is backed by this asset that they're holding. And the SPV actually holds on to that asset, that entire asset the entire time. They're just paying someone else to process it. Regulatory requirements, again, I said, are very stiff. And the last item I wanted to cover is if there's actually a case in the book, if you were to look at your chapter 9, and it talks about a company who, they have a new up-and-coming business. Maybe they're selling athletic wear, and right now there's a high demand for that. Let's say it's Lululemon. All of a sudden, there's a huge market. Everybody's hearing about the Lululemon product, and they want to buy it, and so you can't keep the product out on the shelf. In fact, if you could, you would manufacture more and maybe sell more and create more revenue, but you have limitations. So let's say you're that company You need more money to be able to increase your production, to be able to make more money, bring in more revenue. So there's a couple things you could look at. You could raise money or cash to increase your production line. You could either do that through debt. Maybe you want to take on more debt, which if you take on debt, you might have some interest rate risk there. Another option to create cash or generate cash would be, I'm going to sell accounts receivable for product I previously sold to businesses. A lot of times Lululemon has their own store, but forget that. Let's just say that they do sell it to a third party, maybe a Macy's or a Dillard's, and they say, okay, I'm going to sell you product. That retailer doesn't pay for it until they sell the product. So there's a delay in getting that money. They could take their receivables and turn around and sell it to a SPV or third party who will convert those sales or accounts receivable into cash for them. So that's more money they can put in the production line. And the last thing they're dealing with, let's say, as they're making this athletic wear, they need a certain type of fabric, and that fabric is available, and they've fixed their price, which they're pretty expensive, but I'm buying a pair of yoga pants with a special fabric that, I normally can charge $100 a pair, and that fabric all of a sudden goes up in value, and I can no longer purchase that. If I increase my price substantially, that could be a problem. Maybe people wouldn't buy it anymore. They'll look for alternatives. So you have to look at that. Or maybe they could lock in using a product or a solution which would lock in their prices for them. So let's go back and look at these three things. If I were to take out a loan, what are some of the risks associated with that? First of all, I already mentioned it, is you have interest rate risk. You don't know if interest rates are going to go up. You don't know if they're going to go down. You have that opportunity to, you need the money when you need it, and interest rates could be higher. So what could you use to manage interest rate risk? And as we've already talked about, you could use options, an option contract, which would allow you to lock in or narrow the variability of your interest rates. What about another option of selling your accounts receivable? If you have a lot of accounts receivable and you're selling a lot of product, but you're not getting cash in as fast as you want, there's credit risk. What if Macy's goes under or Dillard's and they no longer can sell your product and pay you for what they've already taken, or they return it to you? You essentially are taking a loss. By getting rid of that, they could use securitization by selling off their accounts receivable to a third party, and that get them the cash that they need, and that reduces their credit risk. The last one we talk about is fluctuating prices with their fabric. That is a input price risk. They know what they're going to sell their product for, what people will become accustomed to buying a pair of their yoga pants for, and all of a sudden the fabric price went up. They can no longer sell it, or they're going to make less money on each pair. So what can they do? They could actually use a forward contract, which allows them to buy the fabric they need at a certain price, and a seller who agrees to sell it to them at a certain price. And that kind of locks in their margin that they plan to make on each product, which gives them a little bit more stability. So these are some different ways of managing financial risk. A lot of times we just look at insurance products. You have to think about, if you're a business, there's a lot of other risks that you're dealing with that can be managed in different ways to mitigate the extreme measures that are associated with a recession or a downturn in the economy like we're dealing with right now. What can I do to better arm my company to deal with these risks going forward rather than waiting until they happen? So that's all I have for you today, and feel free to reach out to me to ask any questions about Chapter 9. Thank you.